There's a thin line between genius and madness, and these 10 cars didn't cross it, they launched over it. Imagine an engine bay lined with real gold, a supercar cooled by 12 radiators, a rotary with 180 feet of vacuum lines, and a 90s Nissan that got banned for being too good. We're counting down the most over-engineered sports cars ever made, and by the time we hit the top 3, you'll know exactly where brilliance becomes too much, and why you still can't look away. Number 10, Nissan 300ZX Twin Turbo Z32. Pop the hood and it looks organized, until your eyes adjust. This isn't an engine bay, it's a wiring diagram in 3D. The VG30DETT sits there grinning. 3.0 liters, twin turbos, twin intercoolers, dual throttle bodies. Everything in pairs like it's afraid to be alone. On paper, it's approximately 300 horsepower and mid 5-second sprints to 60. Approximately 300 horsepower and mid 5-second sprints to 60. In the seat, it feels like silk under boost and granite at speed. Here's where the over starts. Rear wheels that steer themselves. Nissan calls it super high-ess. The first time it nudges you through a fast sweeper, you swear a ghost grabbed the back of the car and helped. The suspension, multi-link at all 4 corners, set up like a lab project that accidentally escaped the lab. It's brilliant when fresh, it gets opinionated with age. And maintenance. Oh, maintenance. You don't change injectors on a Z32, you earn them. The intake plenum has to come off so often owners just say plenum pull and pour coffee. Heat soaks, vacuum lines harden, sensors get dramatic, and every little fix turns into, well, while we're in here, the joke is you remove the car from around the engine. It's funny until Saturday becomes Monday. When it's right, it's magic. Boost rolls in like a tide, steering reads your mind, and at 90, the whole car goes quiet, like it was built for that number. When it's wrong, it's a scavenger hunt with extra steps. The 300ZX Twin Turbo is the 90s in a single chassis. Ambition, elegance, and way too many hoses. Over-engineered? Absolutely. Overrated? Not for a second. It proved Japan could throw tech at Porsche and make it stick. Just bring patience and a good set of knuckles. Number 9, Porsche 959. It looks like a 911 that studied abroad and came back fluent in everything. Under the skin, it's a science project with a license plate. A flat 6 that cools its heads with water and its cylinders with air. 2 turbos that don't hit at once, they hand off. Small turbo for the low end, big turbo for the rush. No drama, just slingshot. Then the brain, PSK all-wheel drive. Constantly shuffling torque, rear when you want push, front when the road goes sketchy. Dry corner, rear biased and playful. Wet exit, it tightens the leash before you even twitch. In the 80s, this felt like wizardry, because it was. Bodywork, not just pretty. Kevlar and aluminum panels. Weight shaved, strength up. Ride height you can adjust on the fly, because Germany looked at speed bumps and said, we'll engineer around those too. Sensors everywhere. Micro decisions, millisecond timing. If the 911 is instinct, the 959 is instinct with graduate school. And it wasn't some fragile lab rat. It went rallying. Paris-Dakar levels of misery, sand, heat, violence. It survived. More than that, it won. Imagine spending a king's ransom to make a car smarter, then proving it by yeeting it across a desert at full send. That's 959 energy. From the driver's seat, it feels calm when it shouldn't. Steering that stays cool, a chassis that reads the road like Braille. And yet, pop the hood and you can hear accountants crying in German. Number 8, Mitsubishi 3000 GTV-R4. This is what happens when a car company tries to build a Swiss Army knife on wheels. Twin turbo V6 up front, all-wheel drive underneath, 4-wheel steering in the back. Then Mitsubishi said, why stop there? And added electronically controlled suspension, active exhaust, and yes, active aero that literally changes the car's shape at speed. Early VR4s drop a little spoiler under the nose and tip a rear wing up when you're moving. Not a light show, real downforce. Hit the switchgear and the shocks click from tour to sport with a tiny servo whir. The exhaust valves open just enough to go from polite to punchy, and suddenly a big, plush GT is doing a pretty good impression of a track day toy. On paper, it's the 90s spec sheet flex 3.0-liter twin-turbo dual overhead cam V6, around 300 horsepower in the early years and more in later updates, 5-speed, then 6-speed as the car evolved. Numbers you recognize. What you don't expect is how heavy it is, and how the tech hides it. Turn in, and the back wheels whisper a few degrees to hell, power down, and the all-wheel drive shuffles grip like a blackjack dealer who hates understeer. And then there's the bill. Active aero panels with little motors that age like gym memberships. Vacuum lines that harden. Solenoids that sulk. Struts that only speak ECS and charge boutique pricing. Transfers, gearboxes, heat. When these cars hit middle age, they want maintenance with capital letters. It's not a mystery, it's just a lot. Later years quietly dialed features back, simpler aero, fewer party tricks, because even Mitsubishi knew the checklist was getting silly. But when a VR4 is healthy, you get that weird grin. Boost builds, the chassis takes a set, and all the gadgets play nice like an orchestra that finally found the downbeat. Number 7. Mercedes-Benz 300SL Gullwing. It looks simple, until you notice nothing on this car is simple. Those doors aren't a party trick, they're a problem solve. The chassis is a tubular space frame, a spiderweb of thin steel that makes the sills sky high. Regular doors wouldn't clear it, so Mercedes hinged the roof and invented the gullwing. Over-engineering? No. Necessary engineering that just happened to become iconic. Under the long hood, a straight 6 with mechanical direct fuel injection. 1950s tech that thinks like a scientist. No carbs here. The result is real power, north of 200 horsepower in period, and a top speed brushing 160 miles per hour, which made it the world's fastest production car when it landed. It uses dry sump lubrication so the engine can sit lower in the frame, dropping the center of gravity and the hood line. Race logic on a license plate. Living with one feels like operating a machine that expects you to know the handshake. You deactivate fuel before shutdown so you don't wash the cylinders. You fold the steering wheel down to squeeze in, like you're suiting up for a flight. The rear suspension uses a swing axle, light and clever, but if you lift mid-corner on the wrong surface, it reminds you that 50s geometry plays by 50s rules. Everything is precise, everything is intentional, and none of it is casual. Even the body panels are a flex. Most are steel. Some cars got aluminum bodywork to save weight. Special, expensive, the kind of option list you read twice. And the space frame that keeps it light and rigid, it runs everywhere. Look past the leather and you can see that lattice climbing through the door opening, like architecture you drive. From the driver's seat, the 300SL feels modern in motion and vintage at the edges. The throttle is crisp, the nose is long but obedient, and the car hums with the quiet confidence of something designed by people who had raced the SLR at absurd speeds and then decided to civilize the idea. Number 6. Mazda RX-7 FD. You don't start this car, you wake it. The 13 BREW hums like machinery from a watch factory. 2 rotors, no pistons, and a pair of turbos that don't hit together so much as trade solos. First, the small turbo spool's low, then, right around $4,000, the big one fades in and the whole car exhales, smooth and sudden, like it just remembered it's a sports car. This is where the over-engineering starts, the sequential twin-turbo system. It isn't just 2 snails and a pipe, it's valves, actuators, solenoids, and a vacuum line spaghetti that looks like a blueprint for a saxophone. The ECU conducts it all. Open this, close that, blend boost here, so the transition is seamless on a good day and mysterious on a Tuesday. When it works, the handoff is butter. When it doesn't, you're chasing a boost gremlin with a flashlight and a prayer. Everything else is obsessed with lightness and response. Aluminum everywhere. Double wishbone suspension that seems to think one corner ahead. Steering that feels like fingertips on asphalt. Curb weight around the mid-2800s, yet it carries itself like it's lighter. You don't fight an FD, you wear it. Turn the wheel and the nose draws the line you pictured. There's no extra motion, no drama, just the car and the corner and your heartbeat. Then there's the rotary reality. Heat is currency. Manage it and the engine lasts. Ignore it and Apex Seals file their resignation. The intake charge needs to stay cool, the oil needs to stay honest, and the vacuum system needs to stay airtight. 30 years on, hoses get brittle, solenoids get shy, and the smoothest powertrain you've ever felt suddenly coughs between turbos like it forgot the lyrics. Owners learn rituals, warm it fully, keep it breathing, let it idle down, treat boost like a favor, not a right. But when it's on song, windows down, second gear, 4,000 RPM, handoff, There, the chassis settles into the road, the wheel comes alive, and the car turns from metal into intention. It's the rare machine that feels engineered, not just to go fast, but to feel perfect doing it. Number 5. Honda NSX NA1. This is what happens when engineers chase perfection, not headlines. Mid-engine layout, a 3.0-liter V6 with VTEC that swings from calm to concert at 8,000 RPM. And an entire body and chassis made from aluminum when everyone else still worships steel. The NSX didn't just go fast, it made fast feel effortless. Open the door and you get race car sightlines. Thin pillars, low cowl, the world laid out like a track map. Turn the key and the C30A wakes smooth, almost shy, then the second cam profile hits and the needles sprint. Under the covers, titanium connecting rods, a hand-assembled engine, tolerances that read like bragging rights. The suspension is double wishbone at all 4 corners, with aluminum uprights and arms that look like sculpture. Light, rigid, obsessed. And then there's the famous ghost in the room, Ayrton Senna, who drove early prototypes and told Honda to make it stiffer. They did. They reran the math, re-welded the seams, and gave the chassis the calm that makes this car feel supernatural on a bad road. The steering is talkative at speed, whisper quiet around town. The shifter clicks like a camera. Pedals line up so cleanly your feet can't help but be neat. Over-engineering NSX style isn't about gadgets, it's about margin. Aluminum everywhere to save weight, yet enough rigidity that nothing flexes out of tune. Cooling that just works. Heat management that doesn't make the cabin wilt. A daily driver temperament wrapped around track day pace. Even the reliability is engineered. Oiling, airflow, service access. So the drama happens at the red line, not on the shoulder. It wasn't perfect. Early cars had the snap ring issue in certain transmissions. A tiny part with a big temper. Later models added electric power steering, and with the 3.2-liter C32B, a 6-speed and a little more bite. But the philosophy never changed. Precision first, spectacle second. The NSX makes you feel like a better driver, not because it hides mistakes, but because it refuses to make any of its own. In a decade that loved overkill, Honda over-engineered restraint. Everything you touch feels honed, everything you hear sounds intentional, and the result is a car that's still the benchmark for how clean engineering can feel like magic. Number 4, Toyota Supra A80 Mark IV. This is what overbuilt looks like when it puts on a straight face. Under the hood sits the 2JZ, a cast iron inline 6 with oil squirters, thick walls, and a reputation for laughing at boost. From the factory, it's 320 horsepower in the US, said with a wing, and sequential twin turbos that spool in stages. Small first for the shove, second blends in for the run. No surge, no drama, just forward. The rest of the car keeps the secret. V1 66 speed that feels carved from a crankshaft. Torsen LSD that finds grip where it shouldn't exist. Big aluminum control arms, a rigid shell, real underfloor aero work so it sits clean at speed. The numbers are tidy, the margins are huge. Toyota didn't engineer a headline, they engineered headroom. Drive it and you feel that margin everywhere. Throttle in fourth, it pulls like the road tilted downhill. Brakes bite once and stay there. Steering is honest, not theatrical. It's quick, but the real trick is how little it seems to care. Heat, managed, oil, stable. The gauge needles look bored, and that calm becomes addictive. Here's the over-engineering. Toyota built a powertrain with ridiculous tolerance for abuse, then wrapped it in hardware that refuses to flinch. The result is folklore. It's not light, it's not fragile, it's not trying to surprise you. The Supra is the engineer at the meeting who brought the data and the spare plan. That's why it became the tuner world's Swiss vault, because Toyota left room, not for gimmicks, but for trust. Number 3, Bugatti EB 110. Open the door and it's deja vu from a different timeline. 90s angles, butterfly hinges, and a cabin that whispers prototype more than production. Then you see the spec, a 3.5-liter V12 with 4 turbochargers, 5 valves per cylinder, and individual throttle bodies feeding each bank like a piano tuning itself at redline. All of it tied to a 6-speed manual and all-wheel drive that keeps the craziness on a leash. The chassis isn't metal in the way you expect. It's a carbon fiber monocoque, built when carbon was still the future, not the default. Light, stiff, expensive, commissioned like aerospace instead of automobile. Over it sits bodywork that slices the air and a rear wing that rises and changes angle, because of course it does. The car isn't just fast, it's constantly doing math so you don't have to. Here's the over-engineering: 4 turbos to flatten the power band, a valve train that breathes like a race bike, and an AWD system that biases the rear but never lets the front nap. Cooling is a full-time job: air pulled, channeled, and dumped via intakes and ducts that look decorative until you realize they're saving the car's life. Every system has a system. It's excess, disciplined. From the seat, it feels strangely calm for something with north of 550 horsepower in GT form and around 600 in the SS. You roll on, not up. The revs climb without spikes. The turbos don't hit, they arrive. The steering stays unbothered, the chassis feels glued, and the horizon shows up early. Over 200 miles per hour wasn't a headline, it was the use case. Number 2, Nissan Skyline GTR R34. You don't drive an R34 so much as log in. The moment it fires, the RB26 2.6 liter twin turbo straight 6 settles into that tight mechanical idle that says ready. Officially, it made 276 horsepower. Real world, the number everyone agreed to print, not the one the car actually felt. Boost builds like a secret, then the whole thing hooks as if gravity tilted in your favor. Here's the trick: a Tessa ETS Pro, a brain with G sensors and wheel speed data constantly pushing and pulling torque, mostly rear, until the surface lies, then it sweeps power forward in milliseconds. Launch on a dusty road and you feel it. The front wakes up, the car straightens, and you're catapulted out of your own doubt. In the back, an active rear diff keeps both tires honest. Over that, Super Hikes adds a whisper of rear steer so the car changes direction like it had a cheat code. And the dashboard. It isn't a gauge cluster, it's a readout. The multifunction display spits telemetry, boost, temps, lap timing, like a pit wall that learned to speak Japanese. You don't wonder what the car's doing, you watch it do it. In the late 90s, this felt like tomorrow. Now it feels like someone smuggled race tools into a street car and dared you to use them. The rest is hardware with no drama. Big brakes you trust, a rigid shell that stays quiet at speed, a 6-speed that slots like it knows the line before you do. The steering is calm on center, talkative mid-corner, and never showy. You turn, it obeys. The systems clean up the mess you didn't make. It's clinical only until you're flat in third and the turbos are singing. Then it's alive. Over-engineering? Everywhere. 2 turbos for response and flow, a torque brain juggling grip in real time, rear steer to clip the apex like you drew it. If you're counting parts, it's a lot. If you're counting seconds, it's less, because the car spends them for you. Number 1, McLaren F1. You sit in the middle, not left, not right, center. 2 passengers tucked back like loyal wingmen. The doors arc up, the roof scoops, stares at the sky, and the cabin feels like a cockpit that misplaced its wings. Turn the key and the BMW Motorsport V12, 6.1 liters, wakes with that dry, silk mechanical chatter that says handcrafted, not mass-made. 627 horsepower, a wall of torque, throttle response like a nerve ending. No turbos, no filters, just air, fuel, and intent. The car around it is a thesis in because lighter is smarter. Carbon fiber monocoque when the world was still arguing about carbon. Titanium where it mattered. Magnesium for hardware. Kevlar in the mix. Everything pared down until only the necessary felt luxurious. And then they lined the engine bay with gold foil. Yes, gold. Because nothing else reflected heat as well. Over-engineering, but make it McLaren. Aerodynamics? Subtle and ruthless. A flat floor with real ground effect. Little underbody tricks that glue the car without drama. A rear air brake that rises under hard stops. No fireworks, just physics doing paperwork. The steering is unassisted. The brakes don't have ABS. And the car's response is immediate. You think, it pivots. You breathe, it moves. There's no layer of electronics to flatter you, because the whole point was a machine pure enough to never need flattery.